My name is Michael. As Eric said, I'm from NIFU, and I'll be presenting some empirical results from this RelinC project. My presentation will be mainly based on results or the research done by Marco Capasso and Marina Rubalka. So I would like to address the question of whether innovation could be an answer to the economic crisis that was following the pandemic. And of course here there are many roads to be innovative, and our focus is to quite explorative investigate if any of these roads are better than others, driving the economy out of the crisis. Actually, who is more resilient and who is actually getting on the Ferrari, driving off into the sunset and get rid of the crisis. So, shortly about the agenda. By all means, I will not go into the theoretical foundation for this presentation or for this project. Eric already mentioned that. Just give you a short empirical motivation for better understanding what happens during crisis. I will go a little bit more into deep, but not much, on the taxonomy. And then I'll spend a little time about presenting results from our investigations for our research. Like who is the more resilient and who acts more agile facing the pandemic. This is just a very simple figure. It summarizes the companies in the Norwegian economy, those with at least 5 employees. So the share of the companies who is actually job creators, those who are creating positive employment development over a two-year period. The blue ones and the red ones are those who have a negative development in employees over two-year period. And if we look, we see the crisis. We see the financial crisis here very clearly. The difference, the job creators are going downwards and the job destructors are going upwards. The same, but not as much, we see the oil crisis. It was not as a severe crisis as the financial crisis was. And then of course we see here at the end, and here we have to have a little bit of caution because the data is not complete, quite complete yet, but still we do get some signals that here we are facing another very severe crisis. Okay, that was a bit of the motivation. So, as I said, going into developing this taxonomy based on innovation patterns, we know that, or at least many have argued, that these aggregated product classifications are somewhat impractical for studying differences in innovation patterns. And for those of you who needed this very explicitly, these are of course the NACE codification, which can be impractical because they do not capture very well the sectoral heterogeneity, the differences between financial capacity, the ability to exploit technology, which is also based on path dependencies, and of course the level and the direction of R&D and innovation. Pavit, in this sense, was a pioneer. He was arguing that we need to break down the economy to better understand it. But also Archibucci wrote this back in 2001. Hopefully, over the next few years, more statistical and econometric work will be carried out to group firms as opposed to industries into the taxonomy categories, according to their intrinsic characteristics such as rate and direction of technical change and their sources of innovation. And that is to a certain extent what we have tried to do. Well, we are no near the first one to do it, I should say, or at least Marco Capasso and Marina Rubalka was no near the first one to do it. But at least we do feel that this is a kind of a novel way of grouping the economy. Just a little bit about how we did the taxonomy. It was based on the Community Innovation Survey from 2018, covering activities in 2016 to 2018. In total, this is based on more than 6,000 Norwegian firms. And for those of you who is interested in the econometric part, this is run by an explanatory factor analysis based on no less than 88 binary indicators. And I just have to look into my manus to, I'm not going to present every 88 of them, but some of them are linked to the previous approaches to innovation, to the market and their strategy, the strategy of each individual company, the R&D and innovation activities, levels of collaboration, who are they collaborating with, different kind of funding for activities, acquisition of new machinery, ICT, etc. But also hampering factors. What factors was hampering innovation, and of course also outcome, product innovation, process innovation, etc. So, and this explanatory factor analysis then grouped the indicators that were highly correlated, and then the empirical study ended up with 11 different groups, 8 main groups and 3 attached groups. Can we say that? I'm just going to briefly go through the 8 main groups and not going to go deeply into them, but at least I would like to focus on 2 here, the active R&D doers and the strategic adapters, because we're going to go a little bit deeper into them afterwards. The active R&D doers are characterized by having formal R&D, have quite a lot of extensive collaboration on their R&D and innovation activities, and they use different public support schemes from the Research Council, from Innovation Norway, but also from EU. On the other end, you might say, the strategic adapters, they're focusing on developing high quality products indeed, but improving existing products to satisfying the demand from already established customers. So this is very incremental in nature. Yeah. The 4 last groups, also I will not go into deep detail about them, but at least have a focus on the radical innovators, since we're going to talk about them a little bit later on. Again, these are the ones who are conducting formal R&D on a regular basis. They introduce innovation, product innovation, at least, which is quite novel in nature. And they also cooperate a lot on their innovation and R&D activities, and also use IPR actively. So, how did the COVID-19 affect innovative companies? Here we use the taxonomy just presented. We use the Community Innovation Survey 2020, which had some specific questions about how the COVID-19 affected financial positions, competition, the innovation, and the strategic decisions of the company. It's in total a sample of more than 6,000 companies again. And the methodology used, we match or correlate, see how the taxonomy, the group of companies, are correlated with different indicators from the innovation survey, using a generalized sequence equation model to test the correlation between them. So this is very simple put forward. This plus indicates a positive correlation, which is significant, between the groups and indicators. So in total we see that for all these 8 different groups, everyone reported that they were affected by the pandemic. Their situation changed, the competition changed, the decision they do, the strategic decision, etc. changed. But only a few of the groups actually reported increased innovation activity during this period of time. And that was the active R&D doers and the radical innovation just mentioned from before. When there's neither a positive or negative sign, there's an insignificant correlation between the two, obviously. And of course, the negative minus sign is a negative correlation between the two. Okay, that was the first result, at least. Everyone is affected. only a few is able to actually increase their innovation activity. So if we change the lens a little bit, trying to use the schemes, the public support schemes as a data source, as Erik was mentioning, we can then try to assess at least some kind of resilience or agility to a crisis. If we look at the compensation schemes, we can use that as an indicator for resilience, because the companies, if they use the business compensation scheme, the salary compensation scheme, or the salary compensation scheme for furloughed employees, if they use that more, then we say they are less resilient to the crisis. And of course the other way around, if they don't use the support mechanisms here, the support schemes, then they are resilient to the crisis. This is modeled by a probit model. We look, since we have very detailed information, we look at 11 sub-periods and the whole time range from March 20 to February 2022, which is more or less the full timeline of the COVID-19 crisis. And we, in the models, we control for firm size, firm age, the main industry, the region, but also the share of employees with high education. I will show you the results in a bit, so this is kind of a cliffhanger, because I also present the methodology around assessing the agility. That is, companies who are positively gaining support for R&D and innovation during the crisis. Here we use a trivariate probit model to estimate the correlations. Again, we control for the usual suspects: firm size, firm age, industry and region, the share of employees with higher education, but also, since this is something where we know that previous experience is very important to successfully obtain R&D support, then we also control for previous experience in applying for this. Okay. So, moving fast forward to the results. Okay. This figure here shows the average predicted probability of receiving compensation during the COVID-19 crisis. If you are above, then you are more likely to have received compensation, and if you are below, then you are less likely to have received compensation. And for simplicity, I've only included 3 groups here. We see that the strategic adopters, those who are running incremental innovation, they are more likely to have received compensation during this time. Whereas the active R&D doers and the radical innovators doing formal R&D, they are less likely to have used or gained compensation. So at least this indicates that companies that are more persistent innovators, who have higher innovation capabilities, you can say, are less likely to have used compensation during this time. Kind of the same picture reveals when we look at whether they use or successfully gain support for R&D and innovation, either from the Research Council or EU, from Skattefond, or from Innovation Norway. In total, I would say 3 groups are pointing out here. We see that the active R&D doers again and the radical innovators are the ones who successfully obtain support, even controlling for previous experience in supporting or getting support. But also innovative suppliers are someone who are successful across these 3 groups of support actors.
Sorry,
okay.
What is InnoSiva?
Sorry, that is Innovation Norway, and SIVA is more a regional, I can say, office. No, people from Innovation Norway, please correct me.
Incubators and
science parks. Yeah. Okay. Okay, just to wrap up, to summarize before this. I mean, our results, all in all, tend to confirm that even innovative firms respond differently to the crisis. And our results also indicate that different approaches to innovation tends to, I mean, those who have formal R&D activities that have higher novelty in their innovation are more collaborating on R&D and receive more public support, or at least are more familiar with using public support as part of their R&D innovation activities. They seem to be more agile, at least more resilient to the crisis when we run the analysis like this. On the other hand, we saw that a group who are not basing their innovation on formal R&D activities and is trying to satisfy the demand from kind of established customer groups running more incremental innovation, that group suffers more during the pandemic crisis. So, though it's hard to really do some very hard-lined conclusions based on it, but at least it tends to seem that innovation capacity building has become somewhat important in facing the crisis. And though it's not easy to measure capacity building here, it's easier to measure, for instance, revenue or number of employees. But in the time of crisis, it seemed that actually capacity building is important in facing crisis. And maybe one implication of that for policymakers. I mean, we are hardly finished with the pandemic crisis. We are facing already new crises. We have inflations. We have increased energy prices. We have, as said, a war in Europe. We have the climate changes already. So maybe one should think about how public support measures can support capacity building maybe better than they do today. Public support measures often tend to, I'm not trying to generalize too much, but often tend to focus on getting premium rents, getting higher than expected growth in terms of added value or employment. But maybe one should add to that a focus on higher than expected capacity building, though it's very difficult to measure. Yeah, I guess that was it from my side. Thank you very much.